So the gravity is custom. I don't, like there's so many things I'm probably doing wrong with this development. I have no idea what I'm doing in Unity. This is my first project. I had a theory that if I work on a project I'm passionate about, I would learn more quickly and more effectively than just by following tutorials and by reading books and stuff and like never doing what I actually wanted to do. I'm working on a PS1 demake of Sekiro. I will be recreating the Hirata Estate level because there are many questions left open in the original game that I would like to expand on. I feel like now is the perfect time to post this video because I'm at a crossroads in development. I have been working on this game for 2 months and I'm just getting to this point where there's like a fundamental contradiction in what I'm doing here. I want to make a game in a PlayStation 1 art style, and on the other hand, the fun aspects of Sekiro cannot be replicated with PlayStation 1 controls. This project is both my way to learn Unity and learn programming, and a way to express myself in a new medium. I started from the model. That's the starting point of the project. I just had this image of Sekiro, a low poly Sekiro in my head, and I wanted to make this, just get a feel for the project, if it could even work. Does Sekiro look good in the PlayStation 1 graphical style? And then if Sekiro could look good, then I think the whole game could work. So at this point I'm realizing I have no idea how to do a character controller. So then I followed this fantastic tutorial series by 1Z1 on YouTube, where I set up a physics-based character controller that works with my gamepad and includes jumping and slope detection. And I love the feel of the controller, very fluid. It was a good series. Okay, so now that I have the character controls down, or so I thought, I can start thinking about the combat. I guess I was thinking here, how do I get an enemy on the screen with our player character and have it move and react to our player to go from attacking to not attacking, like thinking about different enemy AI states. So here's where I really dive in and start experimenting with the animator, enemy behavior, and combat and sneaking mechanics as well. But I still don't have an idea of how I'm going to do the animating, and I just have a rough attack animation for the enemy blocked out, so I just can see how collisions work before I spend a whole day working on attack animations. Even before I imported the enemy mesh, I was experimenting with how I was going to do attack timings. I was planning on simulating attacks from the code and using timers to keep track of the lengths of different attacks. And here I was visualizing an attack indicator, which is this bar for the length of attacks, and changing to a red color when a deflect could be registered, a small window where a deflect could be registered. The point is, I didn't know how I was going to do attacks, blocks, deflects, anything combat related. I just knew that Sekiro combat was very precise, that time is an important factor in the combat. Although this may not look like Sekiro, I did a quick project to get a better idea of how collisions work in Unity and how to pass information between classes and between objects. By this time, I figured out a workflow for animations. I've learned about animation events, and I also realized that my original model didn't fit well on the screen. It didn't have enough blockiness, it didn't have enough presence, and it wasn't similar enough to the PlayStation 1 style. So I created this placeholder model, and I got to work on animations and began experimenting with the PSX graphics. And at this time, I just had a single attack animation for the player and the enemy, but I can block, deflect, and kill him, so we're getting somewhere finally. Now we're on to the present project. So that was December 14th, so that was what, 6 weeks ago? 6 weeks. So in that time, like, I'm surprised that anything has actually been accomplished, considering my starting point was just so terrible. So what do I have now? Let's take a look. So I'm just going to start recording. I don't really have a real plan for how I want to show what I have so far. There's a lot going on here compared to the other projects that I showed. We have our animator down here, which is a total mess. But this shows like all the animations that I've done so far for Sekiro, for the player. We have our enemy here, he's patrolling. Yeah, but I haven't turned on his like detection of the player yet because yeah, we're still just testing. If I attack him, he'll go into an alert state. So let's just attack him. Yeah. We have hit detection. We have hit detection on the player. Let's see. So yeah, we can deflect attacks, block attacks like this, block. What you want to do is deflect. You can, and then when you break his posture like that, yeah, you can kill him. We can also sneak and stealth death blow enemies like this. Insta kill, yeah, death blow. Okay, we can grapple. So you see, like, I'm going up. I was like flying up still when I grappled here, and that'll be fixed when I have the other grappling animation. So can I say like we're getting there in terms of the core like gameplay of Sekiro. My program is very simple so far. I have a player controller class which controls all of the states for my that my player can be in. So here we have moving, jumping, blocking, attacking. All my states here are the same player controller file, so it's extremely easy to like go back and forth and change stuff and have everything in one place. In each of my states, I have here you can see these all inherit from the I state interface, and all of my states have an enter, an action, and an exit function, and this action is what's played during Unity's update or fixed update. So this action will be completed many times per second. And then these are the two functions which I call when I enter and exit the state. So they're just called once. So my way of syncing up this animator with the code and the state of my game is using animation events. So one thing I'm doing for all my animations is locking the animation, so that I check from the code. If the animation is locked, then I can't like do other things. So like while this attack is going on, I can't press jump and then interrupt my animation. So for example here is if the player is, if I'm not locked, so it's like I finished the jump animation and I'm on the ground, then that's my signal, okay, that I finished jumping, and I can play this animation of me landing, and I can get out of, I can exit the player, which like clears all of these animation triggers and bools, and then I can choose which state, which class I want, which state I want to enter from this set of conditions. I have this formula, is this correct? Yes, I have this formula for the a force that's applied to the player during grappling. This x-axis represents the distance from the grapple target, and the y is the force. So as you can see, as we get closer to the target, the force decreases. Basically, it like launches us in the air quickly with this huge amount of force. So even though I'm technically using I'm using a rigid body on my character, I think this is a mistake because I want to be more specific about how I control how the gravity acts on my player. But all this stuff was like laying the groundwork for what's going to be now the ability to create more just of the fun and unique aspects of the game. Here's the thing. People actually like Sekiro for the gameplay. Doing a remake in the PlayStation 1 style is not conducive to Sekiro's fast-paced combat. These fast moments are broken up by periods of careful sneaking and observation. The level design is tight. When I picked up the game, I repeatedly struggled in Ashina Reservoir until I had all the enemies' timings down. I knew exactly when to move, which enemy to kill, and in which order. Sekiro is not a game that rewards blindly running into a group of enemies and just start swinging. You'll be punished. And the contradiction is that PlayStation 1 games are not typically fast. So are there any other demakes that have actually been made that are actually fun and are actually fully playable games in the PlayStation style? I have this creeping fear that the Sekiro PSX can only be a novelty project at best, meaning that the elements that actually make Sekiro fun are not possible to recreate in the PlayStation 1 style. So I want to look at Bloodborne PSX as an example of a demake that can be more than just a novelty. The atmosphere is dark and absorbing, and I think this is something that the PlayStation 1 era does actually better than the modern era of games, which is probably why you see so many survival and horror games in this graphical style. The gameplay of Bloodborne PSX is fast, and there's excellent new content as well that makes the game and takes it beyond just the level of a demake. What is it that is charming about PlayStation 1 games? The gameplay is not as snappy, it's not explosive, and the graphics are not as realistic or high fidelity as modern games. One thing I find refreshing going back and playing Tenchu and Bushido Blade is the simplicity. The simplicity of the story and the gameplay. I think there's something to be said for acknowledging that this is a game, that these are levels, and you're here to play and to be challenged. Maybe this is the main point. Games are trying too hard to replicate the narrative techniques of other media when games are their own form with their own strengths. This is something that FromSoft actually does incredibly well. Narrative through gameplay, through experience, and through design of the world, design of the mechanics. The reason that games like Tenchu are still fun is because they had good ideas, regardless of the technology or hardware limitations that determine the creation of the game. One thing I like about Tenchu is that the slow camera controls force you to slow down. You can't see what's around every corner without stopping, hugging walls, looking around in first-person view, and this is clearly intentional. Full 3D games were such a revolution. It's not surprising that players and developers thought it would be fun to be able to stop and look around in this three-dimensional space. Coming from a modern gameplay perspective, this sort of camera scheme is clunky and it feels slow. But if we play the game as intended, it forces us to slow down and observe the world. What can I learn about the world and my surroundings by looking, by observing this space? Another thing that PlayStation 1 games had going for them, in retrospect, is like the lack of graphical fidelity allowed for greater imagination on the part of the player. Actually, the more abstract the world, the more apparent it is that I'm playing a game, and so the more my imagination is stimulated, which means my brain does more work to make sense of the world and my place in it. That I am part of another world is more apparent when the graphics are blocky and wobbly. I don't necessarily want high fidelity or realism when I'm trying to be immersed in this game world.